Today we're learning about the standards in appraisals when you're getting a mortgage loan. 21-year veteran Justin Brager, he's been through multiple market cycles, and on top of appraising, he was hired as an in-house review appraiser to protect our market from misleading values right after the crash happened in 2009?
2008,
yeah.
Yep.
We all remember. We try to actually block that time out. But now he runs his own appraisal company and services over 20 lenders in Skagit, Snohomish, and Island County. My favorite part of his resume is he's my big brother. So with inventory being so low, I want to make sure that all buyers are having equal opportunity in this market and not being eliminated from an offer just because they're FHA, VA, or USDA. So I wanted to point out the specifics and the differences between all of the different loan types when accepting an offer and what the appraiser actually has to do. Back in the day, there was a lot of overlays, I guess, to VA and FHA appraisals that caused more work to be done by the sellers. They're just pickier on what they needed, and a lot of those have gone away. So with that being said, Justin, if you have a VA appraisal come over, what are you going to do on that specific house above and beyond what you would do on a conventional appraisal?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we measure all porches, patios, decks, stuff like that, which we do not always do on conventional loans.
Okay.
We test all appliances, we test water, so we'll turn on the faucet in the kitchen, make sure the hot water is working. We'll turn on the faucet in the bathroom and flush the toilet to make sure that the water supply is sufficient. The stream is good.
Okay.
We will also check the attics and the crawl spaces.
And what are you looking for when you're checking the attic and crawl spaces?
We're verifying that there's insulation, that there's no moisture, there's no pest infestation. Big thing in the attic is making sure there's no mold, water up there.
Okay.
And in the crawl space, of course, standing water is a big issue in there as well.
Okay. So one of the things that an agent would need to know is that the attic and crawl space is accessible before you get there. So if it's like, I know mine, for example, is like nail or like screwed shut. So
and I don't carry tools with me, and I don't appraise.
Just your measuring.
Just my tape measure. Yeah.
All right.
We don't move personal belongings, so sometimes they're in a closet in the hallway, and there's Christmas stuff stacked over the top of them or anything like that. So just make sure they're clear and readily accessible.
Okay. And then I think there was one other thing that is like more important on a VA and FHA than conventional in flaky paint.
The flaking paint, yep. Number one thing that I see.
Okay.
And so with the VA, it is regardless of your bill. If there's any flaking paint on the house, outbuildings, sheds, fences, anything like that, it has to be fixed.
Okay. So ultimately, if you are a seller or a listing agent and you know it's like going to be an excessive amount of work, like if they have barns and outbuildings and it's really bad, then that would be really an only time you would want to avoid a VA or FHA.
Or get it fixed ahead of time. I mean, if you have two competing offers and one's conventional and one's VA and you know there's a significant amount of flaking paint, then taking the conventional offer over that would probably be the way to go if you didn't want to have it
and
fixed.
I'm hoping that this isn't a huge issue just because no one wants flaking paint because obviously that's ruining the wood underneath, but it happens. Stuff gets neglected. So, And then so FHA, you mentioned so the flaky paint is an issue, but there's a year that you care about.
Yeah, so the difference between the VA and FHA is the 1978 date. So FHA only requires those flaking paint issues to be fixed if the house is built prior to 1978.
Okay, so we've had improvements on our paint.
Yes.
I'm assuming.
Yep. Lead-based paint has gone away.
So now we know the differences between what an appraiser actually has to note going out on the different types. Now let's talk about basics. If you're listing a house, what are the standards, like the bare minimum that you need to make sure the house has to avoid any conflicts or extra time when you get the appraisal back?
Yeah, so the most common things that I see are carbon monoxide detectors, the lack of carbon monoxide detectors on each level of the home.
Okay.
So if you
Pretty sure that's been like 11 years since that's been a rule, but we still see it.
Yep, 2009 is when this went into effect. But the lenders are really cracking down on that in the last 4 or 5 years. So
I mean, it saves lives. It really does. I mean,
yes.
CO2 is a silent killer, and it's obviously it's a rule for a reason,
Yeah.
and it's a simple fix.
Very easy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cheap. They have the plug-in ones, whatever. Just make sure it's on every level.
Every level of the home, regardless if there's a fireplace there, or regardless if there's bedrooms,
And
it has to be on every level.
One thing that I learned from you is all the lenders are different. So like, for example, we can, if you call it a CO2 detector, you can do the appraisal as is, and we can have the agent snap a photo for us or the client and confirm it's been in. But some lenders want to make sure that you go out and do it yourself to confirm it's been done. Well, that's another $150 or whatever gets charged now for that.
And a week or two in the appraisal process.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
yeah.
that seems crazy that it doesn't get done up front, but we're learning. What's another thing that you see often that stalls or causes more cost?
Yeah, the earthquake straps on the water heater.
Okay.
So they need to be double strapped. And that's definitely outside of the CO2, the CO alarms, that is definitely the second most common thing that I see is no earthquake straps. So.
Okay. And that's also a cheap fix, I believe.
Yep, pretty cheap and easy.
Yep. So if you aren't aware, we're on a huge seismic meter of earthquakes. So that is a reason why we have to have our hot water tanks double strapped. Some places east of the mountains, they're not on that, but if you need to know, you can ask your lender. Ultimately, Kings, Snohomish, Island, Skagit County, you're absolutely going to need earthquake straps.
Pretty much anywhere in the Northwest area.
Yeah. So those are 2 checklist things to make sure that you have to avoid any issues, unless you're just going to get a cash offer, but you should have those anyways. Or if you're a buyer, put them in after. How about decks and rotting wood? Since we are in such a wet climate, what are like the basics that you're looking for when there's a deck?
So I would say a general rule of thumb, if there's any rotting wood, missing boards, just have them replaced.
Okay.
It's better to be safe than
Safety.
sorry. Yep. Health and safety issues are always going to come up.
What if there's is there a rule of thumb of like how many steps for a railing, for example? Because there's some decks that are like pretty low to the ground that they might want to keep open for view reasons or whatever. Like, is there
usually if the deck is over 36 inches, it's going to require a guardrail around the outside, the whole perimeter of it.
36 inches.
Yep.
Okay.
And then for stairs, it's 3 stairs. Anything over 3 stairs requires handrails. So.
Okay. Perfect. Back to being wet. What about moss? I see a lot of roofs with moss. When does it become where you as a professional need to call in like a roofer to give a cert on?
We would never require the cert.
Okay.
And this is again a lender specific thing. We would snap photos, note it in the appraisal, and then it's going to be a lender call whether or not they want that to be cleaned or not. We might suggest that a roofer go out and verify that there's been no damage underneath of that moss, but
so maybe just if there's an excessive amount of moss, you might want to get up there and
it should be cleaned off. I mean, a little bit of moss is always normal around here, especially during the winter months, but anything that is excessive should definitely be cleaned off.
Okay. Sounds like everything's pretty level playing field, besides if you're listing a home that has flaky paint and issues with water in the crawl space and mold in the attic. So hopefully you're not proud to list a house with those items, but well, thank you for your expertise and time. And I hope that you guys learned something today and can make the transaction smoother for everyone.